The wind never asked permission on the high plains. It came hard at dawn, sliding through broken boards and open seams, carrying dust that stung the eyes and cold that crept into the bones. The shack at the edge of the valley stood like a tired animal, leaning into the wind, patched with scraps of wood and hope. Most folks had passed it by, shaking their heads, certain no one could live there through another season. Yet that morning a woman stood before it with a hammer in her hand, her sleeves rolled, her hair tied back with a faded ribbon, her face set in quiet resolve. Her name was Eliza Boone, a widow not yet old but already worn by frontier life. The land had taken her husband 2 winters past, not with a bullet or blade, but with sickness that came swift and left nothing behind but silence. Since then, Eliza had learned the sound of her own breathing in the dark, the weight of loneliness when the fire burned low, and the long ache of days where no voice answered hers. She had stayed because the land was all she had left, and because leaving felt like another kind of death. The shack had once been a promise. It had been raised by her husband's hands, rough and proud, meant to grow into a real house when times improved. But times did not improve. The roof sagged, the door warped, and each storm tore away more than it gave. Now Eliza worked alone, lifting planks nearly as long as she was tall, bracing walls that refused to stand straight. Every strike of the hammer echoed across the empty stretch of land, sharp and lonely. From the rise beyond the cottonwoods, a man watched. Caleb Boone stood with his hat low, hands resting on his belt, his boots half buried in the frosted ground. He was her dead husband's younger brother, though younger did not mean softer. The years had cut him lean and quiet, and grief had carved deeper lines than age ever could. He had returned to the valley only weeks ago, riding in from the south with dust on his coat and a look in his eyes that did not rest easy anywhere. He had not come with words, he had not come with comfort. He had come and stood, and that was all. Caleb had been gone when his brother fell ill, gone chasing cattle drives and contracts that paid little but kept him moving. By the time word reached him, there was nothing left to do but ride back to a grave already settled. Since then, guilt sat heavy on his chest, heavier than any saddle. Seeing Eliza alone, fighting the land with her bare hands, stirred something sharp inside him, something he did not know how to name. Eliza knew he was there. She always knew. The land taught a person how to feel eyes before they saw faces. She did not turn. She did not ask him to help. Pride and sorrow held her straight-backed. If she asked, it would mean she could not manage. If he offered, it would mean he pitied her. Neither felt right. The valley itself seemed to hold its breath between them. Beyond the shack, the old west town lay miles away, little more than a cluster of weathered buildings and a church bell that rang only on Sundays. Eliza rarely went there now. The stares were too heavy, the whispers too sharp. Widowhood and frontier life came with unspoken judgments, and kindness often carried a price she could not afford. She traded with a nearby trading post run by a Lakota family, people who understood loss without asking for stories. Old Gray Elk, the trader, had once told her that survival was not about strength alone, but about knowing when the land was testing you and when it was teaching you. His words stayed with her as she worked. Each board she lifted felt like a lesson she had not asked for. A pair of children played near the creek, their laughter thin but real. They were not hers by blood but by circumstance. Orphaned siblings she had taken in after a wagon accident the previous spring. Small hands that helped gather kindling, small voices that filled the shack at night. They watched her now, wide-eyed, sensing the tension they could not name. To them, Eliza was steady. She meant for it to stay that way. Caleb watched them too, his jaw tight. He had brought nothing for them, no toys, no treats, no promises. Only his presence and the silence that followed him like a shadow. He told himself he was there to see how things stood, to judge whether the place could last another winter. He did not tell himself the truth. That part of him hoped she would look up and ask him to stay. The hammer slipped once, striking wood at the wrong angle. The plank cracked. Eliza froze, breath caught in her throat. She stared at the split, knowing she had no spare board to replace it. For a moment, the weight of it all pressed in. The shack, the land, the watching man, the years ahead stretching empty. Caleb took one step forward. Just one, she heard it. Eliza straightened slowly and turned. Their eyes met across the distance, a look filled with things neither had ever said. Grief passed between them, and something else too, quieter and more dangerous. Memory. The way his brother used to laugh. The way the land used to feel kinder. Caleb removed his hat, holding it against his chest. He did not speak. He waited, giving her the choice he had taken too long to give before. The wind swept through again, lifting dust and dried grass, rattling the loose boards of the shack. The children fell silent. The valley seemed to lean closer, as if the forgotten trails themselves wanted to hear what would come next. Eliza looked at the cracked plank, then back at the man who had watched her rebuild her life piece by piece without a word. Her hands tightened around the hammer. She did not yet know if she would ask him to help, or ask him to leave, or say nothing at all. But something was shifting, like the ground before a storm, and the land did not give warnings twice. Eliza did not lower the hammer. She stood with it held close to her chest, as if it were the last solid thing she owned. The wind tugged at her skirt and pressed cold through the thin fabric, yet she felt warm, almost burning, beneath Caleb's gaze. He had taken off his hat, a small sign of respect that carried more weight than words ever could. Still, she said nothing. Silence had been her shield for too long to set it down easily. Caleb waited. He always had been good at waiting. On the long drives, when cattle scattered or storms rolled in without mercy, he learned to stand still and let trouble show its hand first. Now he stood again, caught between wanting to step closer and knowing that one wrong move could send her, retreating behind walls thicker than any plank. The cracked board groaned as the wind pressed against it. Eliza glanced at it, then away, her jaw tightening. That board had come from a wagon wheel she and her husband had broken down years before, laughing as they worked side by side. She remembered his hands guiding hers, his voice full of plans for the future. A bigger house, a small orchard, children running through tall grass. Promises spoken easy, before the land taught them how fragile words could be. After his death, those memories had turned sharp. Every corner of the shack carried him. The marks on the wall where he had measured height. The old chair by the fire that no one else sat in. Caleb looked too much like him in the wrong light, enough to make her chest ache. Same dark hair, same quiet eyes. Only the set of his mouth was different, hardened by years apart. She finally lowered the hammer and set it on a stump. Her hands trembled, though she hid it well. "You've been watching long?" she said. Her voice was steady, but thin like a creek in late summer. Caleb nodded once. Long enough. It was not an apology, it was not an excuse. It was simply the truth. The children hovered near the doorway, pretending to be busy with a length of twine and a smooth stone. Eliza shot them a look, gentle but firm, and they drifted a little farther away, close enough to hear but far enough to feel unseen. They had learned early how to read moods, how to stay quiet when grown folk carried heavy things inside them. Caleb's eyes followed them. "They doing all right," he said. "They are," Eliza replied. "Better than most." That too was truth. They had food enough, a roof that mostly held, and a woman who refused to let the world swallow them whole. Still, the land was not kind to the small or the soft. Each winter tested them anew. Each dry season threatened to strip away what little they had built. Caleb shifted his weight. The ground crunched beneath his boot. "I heard about them in town." Her shoulders stiffened. The old West town had a way of stretching stories thin and sharp at the same time. "You hear much from town? You hear too much?" "I know," he said quietly. "They talk, they always do." There it was, the line drawn clear. Town meant judgment. Town meant eyes that lingered too long and hands that offered help only when it suited them. Eliza had learned to live beyond its reach, closer to the forgotten trails where the land did not ask questions. Caleb understood that more than she knew. He had grown restless in town years ago, long before he left. Folks there expected a man to fit a shape, to settle into a life measured by fences and debts. He had wanted open space, long horizons, work that kept him moving. His brother had chosen differently. Chosen Eliza, chosen roots. That choice had always hung between them, unspoken and heavy. "I should have come back sooner," Caleb said at last. Eliza's eyes flicked to his face, then away. "You did not." "No." The wind carried the scent of snow from the north, faint but certain. Winter would not wait for old regrets to settle. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how thin her coat had grown. Caleb noticed. Of course he did. He had noticed everything since he arrived. The way the roof dipped near the back, the missing hinge on the door, the way Eliza favored her left shoulder when she lifted heavy things, an old injury from a fall she never spoke of. He had watched her fight the land as if it were an enemy that could be beaten through sheer will. He took another step forward, careful, slow. "I can fix that board." Her head snapped up. "I did not ask. I know. I can manage. I know that too." The words were gentle, but they scraped against something raw. Eliza turned fully toward him now, her eyes bright with unshed tears she would never allow to fall in front of him. "Managing is all I have done since he died," she said. "Managing is how I keep standing." Caleb swallowed. He remembered the night he heard the news, the way the stars had seemed cruelly bright, the way he had ridden until his horse could go no farther, driven by a need he could not name. He had promised himself he would make it right somehow. Promises were easy in the dark. "I am not here to take that from you," he said. "I just want to help." Help. The word sounded dangerous. Help led to dependence. Dependence led to loss. The land taught those lessons fast. Before Eliza could answer, a distant sound rolled across the valley. Not thunder, hooves. Both of them turned toward the horizon. A thin line of dust rose where the trail cut through the hills. Riders, maybe two, maybe more, too far to tell. Travelers, perhaps. Or men from town, or something worse. Out here, danger often wore a familiar shape until it was too close to escape. The children sensed it too, edging nearer to Eliza without being called. She placed a hand on each of their shoulders, grounding herself as much as them. Caleb's posture shifted, old instincts waking. His hand rested near his belt, not in threat but in readiness. He had survived enough frontier life to know that trouble rarely announced itself kindly. Eliza felt the weight of the moment settle heavy around them, the shack, the land, the watching sky. She had rebuilt alone for so long that she no longer knew how to stand beside someone else. Yet the riders were coming, and winter was not far behind, and the silence between her and Caleb felt suddenly too thin to hold back what was pressing in. She did not tell him to leave. She did not tell him to stay. She only watched the dust grow closer, knowing that whatever crossed the valley next would change more than broken boards. The dust line thickened as the riders drew nearer, and the valley seemed to shrink around the shack. Eliza kept her hand on the children's shoulders, her fingers firm but gentle. She could feel their small bodies trembling through worn fabric. Behind her, the shack creaked as if it too feared what was coming. Caleb stepped a half-pace to the side, not in front of her, but close enough that his shadow fell across the ground near her boots. It was a small thing, yet it stirred something in Eliza's chest, an unwanted comfort. For months she had lived with only her own shadow for company, and now another one leaned toward hers. "Go inside," she whispered to the children. The older one, a boy with sandy hair and eyes too old for his years, hesitated. "Are they bad men?" Eliza's throat tightened. "I do not know," she answered honestly. "But you go in all the same." They obeyed, slipping into the shack and peeking out through a crack in the door. Eliza stayed where she was, refusing to hide. She had learned a hard truth on the frontier. If you showed fear too soon, some men treated it like an invitation. Caleb watched the riders with the calm of a man who had ridden with all kinds. He counted the shapes through the dust, measured their pace, listened for the way hooves struck the earth. 2 riders. Not a wagon, no herd. That meant purpose, and purpose could be harmless or hungry. As they came closer, Eliza recognized one of them by the way he sat a horse, loose and careless. Harlan Crow, a man from the old west town who always smiled as if he knew something you did not. He owned a piece of the trading route, or claimed he did, and men like him lived off what others built. The second rider was younger, face hidden under a brim, but the posture was stiff, like a man trying to prove himself. Eliza felt Caleb's gaze flick to her. He had not been in town long enough to know every name, but he had the sense to read her body. Her shoulders were rigid, her chin lifted too high. Fear shaped into pride. The riders stopped a short distance away. Harlan tipped his hat, grin wide. "Morning, Widow Boone." Eliza did not return the greeting. This is not your land, Harlan laughed softly, like it amused him that she still believed in lines on paper. Land is a funny thing, he said. Sometimes it belongs to the one who can hold it. Caleb's voice cut in low and steady. And sometimes it belongs to the one with a deed. Harlan's eyes moved to Caleb, sharpening a little. Well now, who's this? You hired yourself a hand, Eliza? Eliza's cheeks burned. He is not my hand, she said. He is family. Harlan's grin widened again, but it did not reach his eyes. Family, he repeated, as if tasting the word. Funny, I do not recall seeing him at the burying. But then folks come and go. Caleb's jaw tightened. The remark was a blade slid between ribs. He had not been there, and the town knew it. Harlan leaned forward in his saddle. I came to talk about that little patch of yours, he said, gesturing toward the shack and the thin line of land that surrounded it. Times are changing. Railroad men got their eyes on routes, and when routes change, so do the men who profit. I hear tell this valley might become useful. Eliza's stomach sank. She had heard whispers of rail lines creeping farther, bringing jobs and theft in the same breath. Sometimes they brought towns to life. Sometimes they bled places dry. This place is not for sale, Eliza said. Harlan shrugged as if she had spoken about weather. Everything is for sale. Even if it is not for sale, it can be taken, one way or another. The younger rider shifted uneasily, eyes darting between them. Eliza caught the look and felt a flicker of pity, a boy trying to be a man. The frontier chewed those up quickly. Caleb's hand hovered near his belt again, but he did not move for anything. Violence was always a door that opened outward. Once pushed, it was hard to close. He could feel Eliza's tension beside him like a wire pulled tight. Harlan's gaze slid toward the shack. You got children in there? Eliza's heart thudded. She took a small step, blocking the door with her body. Leave them be. Harlan held up both hands, mocking calm. No need to get riled. I am only curious. It is hard for a woman alone, raising little ones. Hard enough when you got a husband. A shadow crossed Caleb's face at the word husband. Eliza felt it like a cold draft. Harlan continued, smooth as oil. I can make life easier, Eliza. A proper offer. Some money in your pocket. A ride into town without scraping for supplies. A roof that does not leak. Eliza's fingers curled into her palm. She thought of nights when the wind screamed and the fire died too soon. She thought of the children coughing, of the thin soup she pretended was hearty. She thought of pride and of hunger. It would have been easy, in some ways, to say yes. But if she sold, she would lose the last thing her husband had built. The last place where his memory felt close, even if it hurt. I will not sell, she said again, voice shaking just slightly. Harlan's grin faded. For the first time, his true face showed, a hard line of impatience. Then perhaps we talk another way, he said. There are debts, Eliza. Your husband took credit in town. Supplies. Tools. The storekeeper says the ledger is not settled. Eliza's breath caught. She had paid what she could, slowly, in eggs and work and small coins. She had believed she was close to clearing it. I owe nothing to you, she said. Harlan leaned back, eyes narrowed. You owe plenty, whether you like it or not. And if you do not pay in coin, you pay in land. That is how the world works. Caleb's voice dropped lower. Show your papers, Harlan laughed, sharp. Papers, listen to him. Papers do not keep wolves off your door, friend. Men do. Men with friends. Men with guns? He nodded toward the younger rider, then toward the horizon, as if more were waiting unseen. Eliza felt a cold fear bloom. Not fear for herself, but for the children. The thought of men like Harlan circling closer made her skin crawl. She had survived Western survival by grit, but grit did not stop a man who believed the world owed him. Caleb turned his head slightly, speaking to Eliza without taking his eyes off Harlan. Do you have a deed? Eliza swallowed. It is inside, she whispered. Caleb gave the smallest nod. All right, Harlan watched the exchange, suspicion rising. Do not go reaching for anything you do not want trouble over, he warned. Caleb lifted his hands, palms open. No trouble, he said. Just talk, but talk was not what Caleb wanted. He wanted time to learn what Harlan truly held, time to see if there were other threats behind him, Time to think of a path that did not end with blood in the dirt. Harlan's eyes lingered on Eliza. I will come back, he said. Soon, and next time I will not be so patient. He tipped his hat again, the gesture now a taunt, and turned his horse. The younger rider followed, glancing back once with a look that held apology and fear. When the dust finally settled, the valley felt quieter than before, but it was the wrong kind of quiet, like the pause before a storm breaks. Eliza's knees threatened to give out. She forced herself to stand. Caleb remained still, watching the trail where the riders vanished. His shoulders were rigid, his face pale beneath the sun. They will come again, Eliza whispered. Caleb turned to her, and for a moment the walls between them thinned. His eyes held sorrow, anger, and something tender he did not know how to show. Yes, he said. And this time we will be ready. Eliza looked at him, at the way he spoke as if he belonged beside her. The words should have comforted her. Instead they frightened her because part of her wanted to believe them. Part of her wanted to lean into that steady promise and let it hold her up. She did not yet. Inside the shack, the children pressed their faces to the crack in the door, wide-eyed. Eliza forced a soft smile for them, though her heart was pounding. She stepped toward the door, then paused, turning back to Caleb. You stayed, she said quietly. Caleb's mouth tightened. I did. And if trouble comes, she asked, voice barely above the wind, will you still be here when it does? Caleb stared at her for a long moment, the weight of old failures heavy in his gaze. He wanted to say yes without hesitation, but promises had broken before. The land remembered. I will try, he said at last. Eliza's chest tightened, a mix of relief and hurt. Try was not the same as stay? Yet it was more than she had been given for a long time. The shack creaked again, and somewhere far off a hawk cried out. Eliza picked up the hammer from the stump, feeling its familiar weight, and turned back to the broken plank. She could rebuild boards, but she did not know how to rebuild trust, not when love felt possible and dangerous all at once. Night fell heavy over the valley, thick with cloud and the smell of coming snow. Eliza worked until her arms ached, driving nails by lantern light, refusing rest as if motion itself could hold fear at bay. Caleb stayed close, not touching the hammer, not touching her, but lifting boards when she nodded and bracing walls when the wind surged. They moved like two people who had learned the shape of each other without ever speaking it aloud. When the lantern guttered, Eliza finally stopped. The children were already asleep, curled together beneath patched quilts. Their breathing was soft, and even the sound of blessing and a burden all at once. Eliza watched them longer than she meant to, committing the sight to memory as if she sensed it might be tested soon. Outside, the wind rose. Snow whispered against dry grass. Caleb stood at the edge of the firelight, his coat pulled tight. They will not wait long, he said. I know, Eliza replied. Harlan does not like being told no. She sat on the low bench by the door, rubbing her hands. The silence between them was different now, tighter, charged. You could leave, she added. No one would blame you. Caleb shook his head. I left once already. The words hung there, heavy with meaning. Eliza felt the old hurt stir, sharp and familiar. You left him, she said softly. And I buried him alone. Caleb flinched as if struck. He looked at the ground, then back at her. I live with that every day. I do too, she said. Her voice broke despite her effort. I live with what might have been said, what might have changed. And now I have these children, and this land, and men who think they can take both. Caleb stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Then let me stand with you, he said. Not to take over, not to replace anything. Just to stand. Eliza wanted to say yes. The word pressed against her teeth, aching to be released, but fear rose faster. Fear of loss, of leaning and finding nothing there. Standing with me means danger, she said. It means they will come harder. I know. And if it turns bad, she whispered, they will come for you too. Caleb met her eyes. They already will. A sound cut through the night, faint but unmistakable. Hooves. Eliza's heart leapt. Caleb's body went rigid. He moved to the window, peering through a crack in the boards. A flicker of torchlight glowed far down the trail, more than before. 3 riders this time, maybe 4. They came sooner than I thought, Caleb said. Eliza stood, her legs unsteady. She reached beneath the bench and drew out a wrapped bundle, untying it to reveal her husband's old rifle. She had fired it only to scare off wolves, never at a man. Her hand shook as she checked it. Caleb watched, pain crossing his face. "You should not have to do this, but I will," she said. "For them." The children stirred, sensing the tension. The boy sat up, eyes wide. "Are they back?" Eliza knelt before them, forcing calm into her voice. "Listen to me. You hide in the back under the floorboards if you must. Do not make a sound." "No matter what you hear," the girl clutched Eliza's sleeve. "Will they hurt you?" Eliza swallowed. "No," she said, though she did not know if it was true. "They will not." Caleb crouched too, his voice steady. "You do exactly as she says. She is strong." The rider stopped just beyond the firelight. Harlan's voice carried, loud and sure. "Eliza Boone, we need to talk." Eliza stood, lifting her chin. "We talked. You refused," Harlan replied. "I was unwise." Caleb stepped into view beside her. Harlan laughed when he saw him. "You again?" "Still playing guardian." Caleb did not answer. His eyes scanned the dark, counting shapes, judging distances. One rider dismounted, another circled wide, testing the ground, not a show. A move. Harlan raised a paper in his hand. "I brought something to make this easier. A claim, signed, stamped, says this land is forfeit over unpaid debt." Eliza stared at it, her breath coming shallow. "That is a lie." "Maybe," Harlan said. "But lies have weight when backed by men who believe them." Caleb spoke then, his voice cutting through the cold. "You push this, you bring trouble down on yourself." "There are other eyes on this valley." Harlan's smile thinned. "Are there? Or are you bluffing to save a woman who will never be yours?" The words landed hard. Eliza felt them like a shove. Caleb's face went pale, then flushed. He did not look at her. Harlan took a step forward. "You got two choices, Eliza. Walk away with what you can carry, or watch this place fall apart piece by piece." Eliza felt something break inside her, a final thread of patience snapping. She lifted the rifle, hands steadier now. "You will not touch this land," she said. "Not tonight. Not ever." Harlan froze, surprise flickering across his face. Then he laughed, loud and harsh. "You would shoot?" "I would," she said. She was not sure if she could, but she knew she would try. The wind howled, snuffing the lantern so the world plunged into shadow, broken only by torchlight. One of the riders moved suddenly. Caleb reacted without thought, stepping in front of Eliza, pushing her back toward the door. A shot rang out, splitting the night. Eliza screamed his name as the sound echoed across the valley, and everything balanced on a single breath, waiting to see who would fall. The shot tore through the dark like a whip crack, and for a heartbeat the valley went still, as if even the wind had paused to listen. Eliza's scream caught in her throat when she saw Caleb stagger, not falling, but jerking as if the night itself had struck him. "Caleb?" she whispered, the name ragged on her tongue. He did not drop. He took one step, then another, his shoulders hunched. The torchlight painted his face in broken gold, and Eliza saw it then, not blood spilling, not a wound in his chest, but his hand clamped tight to his upper arm. A bullet had caught him there, tearing cloth and skin, but missing bone. Pain twisted his mouth, yet he stayed upright, planted between her and the riders like a living wall. Harlan's laughter died. "Well," he said, voice suddenly sharper, "looks like you mean it after all." Eliza lifted the rifle higher, sighting past Caleb's shoulder. Her hands shook, but her heart was steady now in a way it had never been. She was not thinking of pride or fear or town talk. She was thinking of two sleeping children and a man bleeding in front of her because he had stepped into danger for her. "You crossed the line," she said, voice low. "Go." One of the riders shifted, raising his weapon again, hungry for the next move. Caleb's jaw clenched. He did not look back at Eliza, but he spoke softly, as if giving her a rope to hold. "Do not fire unless you must," he murmured. "If you fire, it all changes." Eliza felt tears burning behind her eyes. "It already changed," she whispered. Behind them, the shack door creaked. The boy had slipped out, unable to stay hidden, his small face pale with terror. Eliza's chest clenched hard. "Get back inside," she hissed. The boy did not move. He stared at Caleb's arm, at the dark stain spreading. He is hurt, he breathed. Harlan saw the child, and his eyes lit with cruel opportunity. Now that is interesting, he said. A woman alone, and children not even hers. Town will have questions about that. Eliza felt rage flare so hot it stole her breath. You do not speak their names, she said. Harlan lifted his hands again, mock calm. I am only saying what folks will say. A body has to protect what is his. Maybe I can offer protection. Caleb swayed slightly. Eliza moved, instinctively reaching for him, catching his good arm and steadying him. It was the first time she had touched him since he arrived. The contact struck through her like lightning, not romantic softness, but the hard truth of flesh and bone, of a man who could bleed and still choose to stand. Caleb looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then up at her face. His eyes were full of pain and something else, something almost like relief. In the distance, another sound rose, faint at first. A low call, sharp and piercing, then another, not a coyote. Not a bird? A signal? Harlan stiffened. The rider on the far side turned his head, listening hard. The wind carried the sound again, and this time Eliza recognized it. Old Gray Elk's people used whistles like that when danger moved across the trading route. They did not call without reason. A shadow shifted beyond the cottonwoods. Then another. Figures stepped into the edge of torchlight, silent as the trees. 2 men, broad-shouldered, and behind them an older figure with long braids and a calm gaze like river stone. Old Gray Elk. Harlan's face tightened, his confidence cracking. This is not your concern, he snapped. Old Gray Elk's voice was quiet, but it carried. Trouble on these trails is always my concern. The men beside him held rifles, not raised yet, but ready. Their presence was not a threat so much as a truth. They belonged to the land in a way Harlan never would. They knew the forgotten trails, the hidden turns, the places where a man could vanish if he pushed too far. Harlan glanced around, suddenly aware that the valley had more eyes than he counted. You think you can scare me, he said, though his voice had lost its easy edge. Old Gray Elk did not move. I do not need to scare you, he replied. I only need to make sure the right people hear what you have done. Eliza's breath caught. The right people, she echoed, confused. Old Gray Elk's gaze shifted to her, steady. There's a marshal coming through next week, he said. Rail survey men too. They do not like men who forge claims and fire shots in the night. The trading post has ears. The town has ears. Even the railroad has ears when money is involved. Harlan's mouth tightened. You got no proof. Caleb, pale but standing, lifted his injured arm slightly, showing the torn sleeve and blood. This is proof, he said. And there is more inside? Her deed, my brother's papers. Harlan's eyes narrowed, weighing risk. He had come expecting a lonely widow, a broken shack, and silence. Instead he found witnesses, weapons, and a net tightening around him from places he had not considered. The younger rider, the one who had looked uneasy before, swallowed hard and spoke suddenly, voice shaking. Harlan, he said, we should go. Harlan shot him a look full of hate, but he knew the truth. If he stayed, he might win the land tonight, but he would lose his freedom tomorrow. And men like Harlan always chose the path that kept their hands clean enough to steal again later. He spat into the dirt. This is not finished, he hissed at Eliza. Town will still talk. Debts do not vanish. Old Gray Elk's men shifted their rifles higher, and Harlan's horse stamped, sensing the tension. Harlan made his choice. He mounted, yanking the reins. Ride, he snapped at the others. They turned and vanished into the dark, hooves pounding, torchlight bobbing away like angry fireflies swallowed by the night. The wind rushed in behind them, filling the space they left with cold and relief. Eliza's knees buckled the moment they were gone. Caleb caught her with his good arm, holding her steady. For a second she leaned into him without thinking, her forehead pressing against his shoulder. She could smell dust and sweat and something familiar, like the leather of her husband's saddle, and the memory pierced her so sharply she almost pulled away. But Caleb did not tighten his hold to claim her. He simply stayed, letting her choose the moment, letting her breathe. Old Gray Elk stepped closer. You did well, he said to Eliza. She lifted her head, wiping at her cheeks with the back of her hand. They will come back. Perhaps, Old Gray Elk said. But now they will come with fear, not hunger. The children rushed out then, both of them clinging to Eliza's skirt, then reaching for Caleb too, their small hands unsure but earnest. The boy stared at Caleb's arm. "Does it hurt?" Caleb managed a crooked smile. "A little," Eliza's voice trembled. "We need to bind it." Old Gray Elk nodded toward his men. "We brought cloth," he said, "and a healer's salve." Inside the shack, the lantern was relit, throwing warm light on rough walls and worn blankets. Eliza sat Caleb down on the bench and carefully cut away the torn sleeve. Her hands were steady now, not from lack of fear, but from purpose. She cleaned the wound with warmed water, her breath shallow each time Caleb winced. The children watched in silence, their faces pale, their eyes full of questions they did not yet know how to ask. "You saved us?" she whispered, voice raw. Caleb shook his head, the motion slow. "We saved each other," Eliza swallowed hard. "You did not have to step in front of that rifle." "I did," he said softly. "I had to, not to earn anything, not to repay anything. I had to because I could not watch you stand alone again." Eliza's eyes filled, and this time she did not fight the tears. They slipped down her cheeks, warm against the cold night still clinging to her skin. "I hated you for leaving," she confessed. "I hated you because you were not there and I was. And then you came back and you looked at me like you did not know what to do with your own guilt." Caleb's throat worked. "I did not know," he admitted. "I still do not, most days. I only know I'm tired of running." Eliza stared at him, the weight of years pressing between them. Outside, Old Gray Elk's men stood watch near the cottonwoods, silhouettes against the night, guardians of the trail. Inside, the children leaned into warmth and safety, the first true safety they had felt in a long time. Eliza drew a long breath. "If you stay," she said, "it cannot be because you think you owe him, or because you think you can fix what is broken. Nothing can bring him back." Caleb's eyes softened. "I know. And if you stay," she continued, voice stronger now, "it must be because you choose this life, the hard parts, the storms, the town talk, the work." Caleb reached out slowly, stopping just short of touching her hand, waiting. "I choose it," he said. "If you will let me." Eliza looked at his wounded arm, at the blood he had given without asking for payment. She looked at the children, at their tired faces finally easing. She looked at the shack, still broken in places, but standing, stubborn as she was. She placed her hand over his, gentle but sure. "Then we rebuild?" she whispered. Caleb's breath shook like a man who had been holding it for years. "Together," he said. The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were different. The marshal did come, just as Old Gray Elk said, and the forged claim fell apart under questions and witness. Harlan Crow did not return to the valley. Some said he left town before the law could close its fist. Others said he found trouble elsewhere. Either way, his shadow lifted from Eliza's door. Winter arrived, but the roof held. The walls stood straighter, the stove burned warmer. Caleb worked the land at dawn and repaired boards at dusk, and when the wind screamed, he stayed. Eliza watched him closely, waiting for the day his old restlessness would rise, waiting for the hurt she had lived with to return. But each day he stayed was a quiet answer. In time, the town talk softened into something duller, less dangerous. A widow rebuilding became a woman surviving. A man living beside her became simply family, and then, slowly, something more that no one dared name aloud. Eliza did not need the town to bless it. The land was witness enough. On a clear morning after the first thaw, Eliza stood outside the shack, now patched and steady, and watched the children chase each other through grass that was finally turning green again. Caleb joined her, his arm healed, the scar a pale line that would always remind them of the night danger came to their door. He did not speak for a while, neither did she. Silence was no longer a wall between them. It was a shared space, calm and honest. Eliza leaned into his shoulder just slightly. "I used to think love was only what you lost," she said softly. "Something that left you empty." Caleb's voice was quiet. "And now?" Eliza looked out at the valley, at the cottonwoods, at the trail that had once carried only loneliness. "Now I think love is what you build," she said. "Even when your hands are tired." Even when the wind tries to tear it down, Caleb's fingers found hers warm and steady. Then we will keep building, he murmured. The sun climbed higher, spilling gold over the plain. The shack stood firm, the children laughed. And on that stretch of forgotten trails where the world had once felt cruel and endless, a small corner of peace took root, held fast by two hearts that had learned survival first, and then, at last, hope.